far, get you too far.
Back with more of a Friday edition of Southern Fried Sports right here on Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. The show is always brought to you by Peterbrook Chocolatier, and at this time on Fridays, we typically head to the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line and check in with my colleague there at BamaOnline.com, Mr. Charlie Potter, who we will spare the Braves talk after the events of Wednesday evening there at SunTrust Park. Anyway, Charlie, welcome to the program.
Yeah, man, baseball's down. Thanks for having me.
You know what, though? I will say this about the baseball season. I thought that once you and I sort of changed the narrative as to how we approach this segment on Fridays, that's when the Braves really took off, at least in the regular season, right? We took more of a looking ahead than a look behind approach. And I like to think we had a real impact on this Braves season, Charlie.
Yeah, maybe. We probably should have changed it up, though, because some of those veterans didn't show up in the last series, and pitching was obviously really bad in Game 5. So I don't know. It's the future's bright. We'll see what happens in the off season. It's tough to see a guy like Brian McCann hang it up, but I think it was probably time for him, and hopefully they can keep the roster together and add some key additions, and maybe they can break this streak of October woes.
Yeah, that wasn't first half faulty on Wednesday evening at SunTrust Park. I mean, it wasn't second. It was first half faulty, I think, unfortunately, more than it was second half faulty. But let's talk some college football. I'm guessing you're en route to College Station as we speak. Charlie going to anchor our coverage from Texas A&M of tomorrow afternoon's game there. Let's talk injuries first and foremost. I know Nick Saban on his radio program last night was a little more offered a little more confirmation on the situation at center involving Chris Owens, maybe Will Reichard in the kicking game as well. Talk about where those particular areas sit right now as this team makes the trip out to Texas.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see Chris Owens play this weekend. And, Nick Saban, it sounds like even next week against Tennessee's up in the air. And you got to wonder, if the offensive line with Landon Dickerson at center and Deontay Brown at right guard, if they go out and just maul Texas A&M, who has a pretty good defensive front, and if Owens is able to get back on the field in the Tennessee game, he might lose his opportunity. It's kind of a situation where this might be the best spot they have. And it's a mammoth offensive line, if that's the case, with Dickerson at center and Brown at right guard. And, we'll see. Dickerson's a guy that doesn't have much experience at center. He said his first time playing in the game was in the New Mexico State game earlier this year, and they're going to be in a pretty hostile environment up at A&M. So we'll see how that quarterback-center exchange goes. But with Will Reichard, I think there's a lot more gray area with that. We saw him at practice, and Nick Saban said that he kicked for the first time Monday and that he kicked Wednesday as well. We didn't really see much from him during the media viewing periods, although we never really see much from the kickers when we're out there. And it sounds like they're just still monitoring him day to day and how that hip's doing. And that's a tricky injury for a kicker, whether it's place kicking or punting. And I think if we do see him, it'll be on field goals and extra points. I think they would still probably let Joseph Boulevos handle the kickoffs and maybe Skylar DeLong handle the punts. But that's something that I'll really be watching in pregame warm-ups, seeing how much he does, seeing how much he looks like he's going to do, and see what the status is for the kicking game.
It'll be interesting, I guess, in pregame, Charlie, just to note how many specialists they take on the road for an SEC game with the situation not only involving Will Reichard, but the uncertainty surrounding Skylar DeLong, I guess.
Yeah, it will be. I know a little bit of talk has been made about some of the walk-ons, but you look at the the roster, I think, is kind of a telltale sign. The roster they put out in the game notes with the 110 players, and walk-ons like Ty Pirine, he's not on there. I wouldn't imagine that if he's not on that he makes the 70-player travel roster. So I'll be interested to see what happens. I don't really know of any scholarship player that has a punting background. We haven't really seen that much. Out in warm-ups, guys like we've seen a Mac Wilson in the past handle some of that. They don't really have that this year. So yeah, I don't know if it's just Skylar DeLong or bust if Will Riker can't go, but you got to hope that maybe the offense is clicking once again, and they don't need that. But it's always a concern just because we just haven't seen any consistency from Skylar DeLong, and he's a guy that it looks to all be in his head when he's out on the field, and if that continues to be the case, Alabama's going to want to get Will Riker back as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I would think you would take the 3 scholarship kicker punter types, and if you have to use Riker in emergency, you could do that. But you're right. I think that the situation you outlined with all 3 potentially being involved tomorrow in some form or fashion makes a lot of sense. Talking with Charlie Potter, the Alabama beat reporter, team insider for BamaOnline.com on Southern Fried Sports, presented by Peterbrook Chocolatier. Defensively for this Alabama team, Charlie, the challenge, it seems like first and foremost, involves quarterback Kellan Monde for Texas A&M, whether that's Kellan Monde throwing the football around, whether that's Kellan Monde using his feet. I think it became pretty clear to us early in the week at some of the media viewing periods that priority number 1 is number 11 for A&M.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I think they want to make him one-dimensional and especially make him beat you throwing the football because we've seen what running quarterbacks have been able to do against this Alabama team. John Rice Plumlee, the true freshman at Ole Miss, had a pretty successful day 2 weeks ago, and I don't think they want a repeat performance of that. The good news for Alabama is they know what kind of player Kellan Monde is. That won't be something they're caught off guard with. And, yeah, you're right. When we were out there earlier in the week, I think we saw some things we weren't supposed to see, and I don't think one South Ontario was too happy about. They don't have that great of a running game. He hasn't really put up that big of running numbers, but we've seen what he's been able to do in the past. I think in last year's game, he was just a couple yards shy of 100 yards on the ground, and he definitely has that dual threat ability. So they respect that. And, yeah, thinking of key matchups for this game, it's really that entire defense against number 11. And if they can keep him contained and trying to make him one-dimensional throwing the football, I think Alabama's defense will have a pretty good chance.
Charlie, with a really good piece on junior safety Xavier McKinney at BamaOnline.com this week. If you haven't seen it, posted. It dropped a couple of days ago. And I thought it ended up being timely for a couple of reasons. First of all, Xavier McKinney's having an All-American type season at safety. But then you had the issue at Penn State where the player received a letter, not anonymous. I guess we can say one thing for the idiot that sent that letter. He put his name on it. Where it was mentioned that, this particular Penn State fan had issues with the hairstyle of this Penn State player, the tattoos, things like that. I know in part, a big part of your piece and kind of trying to find out who Xavier McKinney is, you kind of delved into that topic of tattoos and their meaning and things like that. Talk about that piece with Xavier for us a little bit.
Yeah, first and foremost, I just really appreciate him and his brother taking their time out to share, some non-football stories. It was good to, sit down with Xavier for about 15 or 20 minutes and not talk about football. And that's something that's really important to him, is that he is more than a football player. I think that's something that this whole Penn State situation is at the heart of it, is that these guys are more than just athletes. They're more than just making people happy on Saturdays. And Xavier's the guy that, self-expression is really important to him. He got his first tattoo when he was 16. I think his brother helped him design it or drew it up. And then from that point on, a way for him to escape and to de-stress and to take his mind off things, just to dive into a sketchbook and coming up with ideas for tattoos. He actually wanted to major in art when he came to Alabama, but it didn't really match up with his football schedule. So now he's going into financial planning, and I'm sure that'll come in handy, once he gets a big NFL paycheck, and he wants to, make money off of this money. And he's a guy that's really intelligent, is a kid at heart, though, and I think he views the game the way it should be. He knows that it's a business, and in Alabama, that's obviously something that's pretty pertinent, but he's a guy that still has fun out there. He likes watching cartoons, drawing cartoons, and then, basically flashing them all over his body with different meanings. And is really cool just to get kind of a look behind the curtain and see what makes him tick. And I think he and a lot of people, the idea that they are more than just an athlete, they can talk about other things besides football, is really important to him. And that's something that really came across to me in our conversation.
Does a lot of his talking on the field by way of production, and in looking at tomorrow's game, talking about Kellan Monde and the likelihood of him being as dual threat as a guy can be with everything that's on the line for A&M and Alabama in this game. Any reason to think that we won't see another double-digit kind of tackle performance from Xavier McKinney? His importance tomorrow, is he a guy that you expect to sort of spy Kellan Monde at times? Just the different ways, I guess, that they're able to use Xavier McKinney, Charlie.
Yeah, no doubt. When we've been out there, usually we'll see one day of like nickel drills and one day of dime drills, but we've seen a lot of dime this week, and that means that X is going to be close to the line of scrimmage in that money roll. And yeah, I mean, he'll be close to the line of scrimmage, and he's a guy that is not afraid to help and run support. Whenever some of these linebackers have been lacking, he's always there as kind of the cleanup man. That's how he picks up a lot of his tackles. Is he's kind of the safety net back there. With no pun intended for his position, but he's played well. He's helped a lot of those young guys along. He and Anthony Jennings both, and Nick Saban's been very adamant about how he and Jennings have been the most productive players on defense. And I think with this game and what we were able to see from him in that Ole Miss game, I wouldn't be surprised to see him rack up, another game of double-digit tackles and to continue to lead the team in that category.
So what are you expecting tomorrow afternoon, Charlie, in terms of how this thing plays out between the Aggies and the Crimson Tide?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting just because it's a raucous environment. They're facing an offense that they kind of had a little bit of trouble with in their last outing, and then you have a guy like Kellan Monde and some receivers that can make a lot of plays. So I really think that taking away that run is going to be important for Alabama. I think A&M can score maybe early, maybe get one late, but I still think that Alabama wins this one by 2 or 3 touchdowns. For me, I know we do our predictions back in the summer, and I had it at 38-20, and that's right on the nose of where this line was, at least when it opened. I think it opened at 18. But I'm probably going to go with 41-20, give Alabama a 21-point win, getting 40 points once again. And, this offense for the Crimson Tide with Tua Tagovailoa and these receivers, it's just too much for teams. And I think with the offensive line that they're fielding, if a guy like Deontay Brown is in good enough shape, and if Landon Dickerson can handle the crowd noise, I think they can be balanced if they want to and milk out some of the clock and keep that defense off the field to still produce enough points and kind of put their number or put up as many points as they want to. So I think it'll be not necessarily that lopsided of a win, maybe what we've seen in the last couple of SEC games, but I think Alabama wins in pretty convincing fashion.
Well, there you go, Charlie. We'll let you get back to it. Safe travels out there to A&M, and look forward to catching up with you here on the program next Friday. Thanks, Charlie.
All right, man. Thanks for having me.